Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And yesterday we neglected to tell you, I apologize from the bottom of my heart, that yesterday was National Coffee Day. We often tell you about the national days. Yesterday, that was a real one with some discounts at your local coffee shop. And we failed you on the Mo News Podcast.
Unfortunately, we didn't realize it until our morning meeting on Monday. But at that point, probably half of our audience already had their coffee. So we didn't really know what to do with the information. We're like, is this even worth reporting?
Well, like
or
Hawaii,
are people going to be annoyed that we didn't tell them?
Hawaii and late sleepers on the West Coast. So, we issue corrections when necessary here on the podcast. And it's not necessarily a correction. It's an apology for letting you down. But hopefully you were delightfully surprised yesterday when you went to a coffee shop. If you do buy your coffee, you don't make your coffee at home, and you got yourself a little discount. Have a second cup on us today.
Moshe, put it on our bill.
Can you imagine? Like somebody's going to send an attachment on Instagram. Here's my receipt. Here's my bank account number and my routing number. I look forward to being reimbursed.
That's what I like to tell my husband, though. Just put it on my tab. All right, let's get to some headlines here. Potential breakthrough when it comes to peace in the Middle East. President Trump outlines a 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza. Israel is on board, but is Hamas?
Jill, some fascinating developments yesterday at the White House and in the Middle East. We'll tell you what we know, but this is a fast-moving story.
And a mea culpa from Benjamin Netanyahu. While at the White House, the Israeli prime minister called Qatar and apologized for that airstrike earlier this month.
Technically, Trump called Qatar and then put Bibi on the phone.
You got a minute? Can you?
You
I have someone here who wants to talk to you.
Before we continue this, you need to say sorry.
Back in the U.S., it's looking more likely that the government will shut down in about 24 hours from now. Where things stand, and is there any hope that a shutdown will be avoided? Meanwhile, President Trump threatening fresh tariffs related to furniture and movies not made in America.
Yeah, we'll tell you what's behind those two threats.
To the weather, two very strong tropical systems, Imelda and Umberto, will either hit the United States. In business news, you've probably heard about working 9 to 5, but how about 996? We'll tell you about the hustle culture trend that's taking hold in Silicon Valley.
Which is also different from 6767, Jill.
6767.
We're bringing in some alpha generation trends into the podcast today for the first time.
Speaking of working 9 to 5, Dolly Parton has postponed her Vegas residency because of some health issues, what we know. And China opens the world's highest bridge. How tall is it? And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, the one and only Mariah Carey made some big history on this day.
All right, starting with a potential breakthrough when it comes to ending the war in Gaza. On Monday, the White House released a 20-point plan to end the war between Israel and Hamas. President Trump has been working closely with several Arab countries, including Qatar and Egypt, on that plan, which would bring about a number of key goals. The end of the nearly 2-year-old war, the disarming of Hamas, which would have no role in a post-war Gaza. Israel would agree to hand over the territory that it has conquered in Gaza to an international force. The return of the remaining Israeli hostages, including the about 20 believed still to be alive. A significant increase in humanitarian aid to Gaza. Also, the deal completely rejects the idea that Gazans would be forced to leave Gaza. According to the plan, the area will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza. Also, Israel would release 250 life sentence Palestinian prisoners, plus about 1,700 Gazans who have been detained since October 7th, 2023. President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a joint press briefing at the White House where the Israelis announced they are on board with this plan. So here's President Trump, followed by Prime Minister Netanyahu.
I also want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for agreeing to the plan and for trusting that if we work together, we can bring an end to the death and destruction that we've seen for so many years, decades, even centuries, and begin a new chapter of security, peace, and prosperity for the entire region.
If Hamas agrees to your plan, Mr. President, The first step will be a modest withdrawal, followed by the release of all our hostages within 72 hours. The next step will be the establishment of an international body charged with fully disarming Hamas and demilitarizing Gaza. I appreciate your willingness to lead the body, Mr. President.
So as you heard there, Hamas still needs to accept this deal. Trump's plan would also establish a temporary governing board that would be headed by Trump himself. It would also include former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who, along with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, helped to put together the framework for this plan. So, Moshe, the press briefing went on for a while, but notably, no questions from the media, uncharacteristic of President Trump.
Jill, there was an interesting exchange at the end of that press conference where Trump's like, given how precarious stuff is right now, maybe we don't take questions. Bibi, what do you think about that? Do you want to take a friendly question maybe from the Israeli media, like a friendly reporter? He's like, I don't have any friendly reporters in the Israeli media. Notorious, by the way, Netanyahu has not done many interviews with the Israeli media. He actually, echoes Trump in some ways, talking about like a deep state, talking about how the media is against him all the time. But interestingly, Trump does a lot more interviews and a lot more questions from media, including media that is very critical of him, his normal press corps. Whereas Netanyahu has not. Netanyahu spends more time sometimes with American influencers, podcast hosts, not us, and very friendly folks versus actually taking tough questions. It's one of the knocks on him in Israel is that he doesn't answer many questions.
Moshe, I was watching this briefing live on the Mo News Instagram account, actually, where we streamed their joint press conference on both Instagram and the Mo News YouTube page. But I was just watching, and like you said, Trump threw it to Netanyahu saying, look, if you want to take a question from some friendly media, go ahead. And you could see the wheels spinning in Netanyahu's head. Should I take a couple of questions? I feel like I've got some good news here. And then he was just like, no, you know what? Trump said we're not going to do questions. We're not doing questions.
Trump's house, follow the dealer's rules there. And of course, there's just a lot of elements to this. It's not just Israel. It's not just the U.S. You have all the Arab countries involved. And then notably, Hamas is involved here. And that's the thing we're going to be watching for in the coming hours, coming days, potentially coming weeks here. We'll see how long they're really given to accept a deal. But will Hamas accept the deal? The deal that's laid out here, Jill, in the 20-point plan, effectively is the end of Hamas as we've known it for 40 plus years. Their core mission, since its founding, has been the destruction of Israel, the replacement of Israel with a Palestine, an Islamic Palestine. They discuss at length and have engaged at length in violent resistance, right, in terrorist attacks over the course of the past 4 decades. And this deal, this plan is, you're done with that. You renounce violence, you're disarmed, you're not involved in government. So this is effectively signing the end of their own organization, right? Which leads a lot of folks to say, well, there's no way they agreed to this, right? And that's the big question. What form are they left in right now? And given the involvement here of the Qataris, of the Egyptians, of the Turks, a number of other countries as well, but I mentioned those three because those three have the most amount of influence over Hamas. And so to what extent will they say, hey, time's up, you're done? And how will those negotiations go down? Especially in light of the fact that, Hamas leaders know that if they leave Qatar anytime in the future, they're probably signing their own death warrants themselves. The Israelis will come after them, especially given what unfolded, the snafu that unfolded, which we'll get to in a second here in Qatar recently with the Israeli assassination attempt. So Qatar's like, listen, you guys want to live here for life and survive? You need to make a deal here. And so Hamas initially put out a statement yesterday saying, we didn't get a copy of the deal. We need to see the deal, which has been out very publicly. They could go to the Mo News Instagram account and see the deal. Then eventually, we learned late Monday that the Egyptians and the Qataris were like, yeah, we've given the deal to Hamas. They say they're looking it over. Ultimately here, what's going to be key is that this is a long-term plan. We're talking about a 20-point plan. There needs to be a whole number of things that happen that then trigger the next thing, that then trigger the next thing, that then trigger the next thing. And we're talking about complicated things. I mean, Jill, you could even get the point number one of the plan. And, if you're looking at this as a diplomat, point number one, Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Sounds simple enough, but based on whose assessment? The Israeli assessment? The American assessment? Other Arab countries' assessment? A terror-free zone that does not pose a threat. Define threat. Define terror-free. And so, there's a lot of complicating factors here in this, very general 20-point plan. What is interesting here also, what struck me is that a number of the countries that are being consulted on this, that are working with the Americans on this, don't actually recognize Israel as a country, don't have diplomatic relations. I'm talking about the Pakistanis, talking about the Saudis, even the Qataris, right? Officially there's no relationship there, but obviously there's a lot of behind the scenes and in some cases in front of the camera negotiations that have happened here. So, ultimately, what is the safe passage here for Hamas leaders that know that time will be up here? Trump made a point of saying, if you don't accept the deal, Hamas, we will back Israel in completely destroying you. That is a threat that effectively Trump has already made good on when it comes to Iran. Remember, he did those nuclear talks in the spring. He gave them 60 days. They didn't agree to anything. Well, what happened? The 12-day war with Israel, certain programs there decimated in Iran, the U.S. sending B-2s in, dropping, a whole bunch of munitions on the nuclear reactor, setting their program back significantly. And so you could have the Qataris and the Egyptians here say, Hamas, look, Trump, backs up his word. You got to make a deal here, or what's happened to Iran, more significantly, is going to happen to you. And that's going to be, among the interesting things that we watch here, which is what is the deadline? How much time do they have? How do the negotiations unfold moving forward here? And significantly, as part of this plan, they rolled out something called the Board of Peace, a transitional body that'll oversee Gaza, headed and chaired by President Trump, of all people. So a really interesting evolution here. Remember when Trump rolled out the Riviera of the Middle East there plan for Gaza a few months ago, laughed at, mocked, upset a whole bunch of Arab leaders? Effectively here, he began the negotiations from a very far place and has gotten a certain version of some of the things that he laid out and was laughed at by certain leaders in the region just a few months ago.
The one big thing that's different about this plan, as I mentioned earlier, is that they are not encouraging Palestinians to leave Gaza. In fact, they're encouraging them to stay in Gaza and saying, we're going to rebuild and we're rebuilding for you.
Right, but we should remind folks, all predicated on Hamas effectively giving up its mission of 40 plus years.
Another bit of news from that meeting yesterday on Monday, Netanyahu called the prime minister of Qatar and apologized for the recent Israeli strike on Doha, which was targeting Hamas leadership in the city. The White House facilitating the call. Netanyahu also expressed regret for the killing of a Qatari security officer during the operation. Israel will reportedly be paying compensation to the family of that security officer who was killed.
Netanyahu doing his best version of, is it too late to say I'm sorry? To the Qataris, sorry, Bieber, for that. BB doing Bieber. But apparently the way they lay it out, he's literally sitting in the Oval Office. Trump rings up the Qataris, puts Netanyahu on the phone, and, I imagine we'll get more details here in the coming days, but he's like, Netanyahu, go say you're sorry for the whole missile strike that you did a couple weeks ago. Apparently, this was a huge thing for the Qataris. They wanted an apology. For those of you who've been following this story very closely, we had told you over the weekend it was a 21-point plan rolled out on Monday as a 20-point plan. Some of you asked, wait, what happened to that 1 point? That 1 point was apologize to Qatar and promise never to bomb them again. And so Netanyahu effectively did that, but he made sure to nuance it, saying, I wasn't trying to attack you. I was trying to attack Hamas in your country. And we should say this is not the first apology for Netanyahu for various incidents over time. We could go back to the 90s. There was a Mossad attempt to poison one of the Hamas leaders at the time, Khalid Mashal, who actually is still a Hamas leader. In fact, notably, was part of the assassination attempt in Qatar a couple weeks ago. Anyway, the Israelis failed in that poisoning attempt, or I should say succeeded. But then Bill Clinton intervened and forced Bibi, who was prime minister at that time in the 90s, to send the antidote to Jordan to save Mashal's life. So then subsequently, Netanyahu had to apologize for that, doing that in Jordan. And then there was another apology to Turkey back in 2010 over another situation. Nonetheless, the apology happened. The Qataris apparently back on board here. They're going to put some pressure on Hamas. We'll see what unfolds here. Everyone seems to be sort of going in the same direction right now, except for Hamas. And that's going to be the interesting thing to watch, is how does that unfold here in the coming weeks?
Back to that call really quickly. It is interesting because Israel put out the transcript of the phone call. And in it was sort of like this airing of the grievances where Netanyahu said, look, I know you guys have some grievances against Israel. Israel has some grievances against Qatar. And he mentioned their support for the Muslim Brotherhood. As we've talked about, Qatar owns Al Jazeera. So Netanyahu said, we don't like how Israel is portrayed on Al Jazeera. Also, Netanyahu talking about how Qatar supports anti-Israel sentiment on college campuses. So all of this appears to be part of Netanyahu and Israel's issue with Qatar. But one of the outcomes of this is that they've established this trilateral forum, so the U.S., Qatar, and Israel, where they're hoping that they can have better dialogue.
Yeah, it's the Middle East, folks. These people all have grievances with each other, sometimes going back several centuries or several millennia, if you will. And so ultimately here, it's very interesting to watch Trump's diplomatic moves in the region and how he handles things in a very non-traditional way, and in some cases is making progress where other administrations have not.
And part of the reason that he was saying that he was not going to take questions is because he had to go to another major negotiation, this one about a potential government shutdown, which could happen as soon as midnight tonight. So on Monday afternoon, Trump met with Democratic and Republican congressional leaders at the White House. And it is looking very much like there is still no deal on funding the government after the current spending bill expires at 12:01 a.m. Wednesday. So Vice President J.D. Vance was in that meeting. Here is what he said afterward.
I think we're headed to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing. I hope they change their mind, but we're going to see. We have disagreements about health care policy, but you don't shut the government down.
So there's J.D. Vance pinning it on the Democrats pointing a finger at Republicans. Here is Democrat Chuck Schumer.
Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before. When I was leader, we negotiated 4 times with Republicans, and we never had a shutdown. And so it's up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not.
So most Republicans want to pass a 7-week temporary spending bill before cutting any sort of long-term deal. So this would just essentially keep the government running under the current spending plan while giving themselves a bit more time to negotiate a new budget. Republicans have a 53-47 majority in the Senate. They need 60 votes, though, to pass most legislation. So 7 Democrats would need to sign off on that stopgap spending bill in order for it to pass. Democrats, though, are insisting on billions in healthcare funding. They want to extend subsidies for the Affordable Care Act before they will sign on to the GOP plan.
So interestingly, at least as of this recording on Monday night, Democrats holding firm here, not like the spring when Chuck Schumer acquiesced to the White House. He was very concerned about a government shutdown and what Trump could do during a government shutdown. And then in acquiescing, he got a lot of grief from the left, being like, well, you got to fight President Trump. We definitely don't support things that he's doing with this. And Schumer had said in the spring, I don't disagree with you, but ultimately I'm more scared about what Trump is willing to do during a shutdown. This time around, though, it appears Democrats are willing to risk a government shutdown to stand up for what Democrats believe when it comes to healthcare, Medicaid, and a number of other matters. The downside, of course, is a government shutdown. The stakes are high here. The White House Budget Director, Russ Vought, instructed agencies and departments across the government to draw up lists of employees to fire if and when the government shuts down tonight. Now, typically, in a shutdown, non-essential government workers are furloughed, meaning they're eventually brought back when the government reopens. What Trump has threatened to do here as part of his leverage play against Democrats is, no, we're not furloughing people. We are getting rid of people across the government. And the budget director here, Russ Vought, well, what was he involved in before working at the White House? Project 2025. A key measure in Project 2025 was expanding the power of government and cutting the government significantly. So for Vought and a number of people inside the White House, they're very excited about this opportunity. And this is the risky bet Democrats are making here in trying to stand up to Trump in the Senate to try to potentially get some changes here to the budget. But again, Trump and the White House are like saying, well, make your bet here because ultimately we're willing to let you shut down the government so then we can do what we want with it. So it'll be interesting to see what unfolds here. We should note that as of late on Monday, Chuck Schumer had approached some fellow Senate Democrats on a 10-day extension of the deadline, saying we need some more time to negotiate here. We did have our meeting at the White House. It did not end well, but maybe we don't want to risk a shutdown tonight. Maybe we want to extend things for 10 days. Now, that will require Republicans, especially over in the House, agreeing to a 10-day extension. Will they hold firm? We're going to watch how this all unfolds. The last few times we've watched this, Jill, no shutdown. This appears to be like there's going to be a legit shutdown here. at least for a few hours, unless something really changes as we, after we recorded this on Monday night or throughout the day on Tuesday. So we'll watch that closely. Stay tuned to the Instagram page and our Substack later this afternoon.
All right, time for the speed read. Now to the latest on that church shooting in Michigan. From the Mo News Instagram, at least 100 federal investigators are responding to the attack, where a former Marine crashed a pickup truck into a Mormon church during a Sunday service, shot into the chapel, and then set it on fire. At least 4 people were killed, 8 others injured Sunday in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan, at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The police chief of that township on Monday saying everyone has now been accounted for. As we reported yesterday, there were still about 7 people who had been unaccounted for as of Sunday evening. The victims ranging in age from as young as 6 to 78 years old. Officials have identified the suspect as Thomas Jacob Sanford, who is 40 years old. They say he was neutralized in an exchange of gunfire with responding officers. He was a Marine vet who had served in Iraq. So the FBI acting special agent said that this was a targeted act of violence, but he didn't give a motive or say specifically who the shooter was targeting, but a different story from what the White House press secretary told Fox News earlier in the day.
Yeah, it's not clear here whether the White House is getting ahead of things, but we will see how this all unfolds, because we began Monday morning with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying that they were investigating the motive here, that she had said based on her conversations with the FBI director that all we know right now is, quote, this was an individual who hated people of Mormon faith. That's what she said on Fox News Monday morning. Now, as of Monday evening, we haven't seen follow-up from law enforcement on that related to specifically where that comes from, his hatred of people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But there have been various reports on social media. Again, I haven't seen anything verified at this juncture, but they are investigating, dozens of officials there to what extent this may have been a hate crime and motivated by hate of that group. Jill, also concerning on Monday, as we learn more details about the fact that he's a veteran, we were watching also the aftermath of the mass shooting at a bar restaurant in North Carolina, which was also committed by an Iraq War veteran, which we talked a bit about on the podcast yesterday, leading to a discussion here about the lack of resources for our veterans in need.
Now to the latest on President Trump's tariffs from CNBC. A couple of new tariff threats from President Trump. On Monday, he said he would impose a 100% tariff on foreign-made films and also slap substantial tariffs on any country that does not make furniture in the United States. Still a lot of questions, though. In a pair of Truth Social posts, he claimed that California's movie-making business and North Carolina's furniture industry have been lost to other countries, and that the new tariffs on imports would reverse the slide. So starting with movies, Trump wrote, quote, our movie-making business has been stolen from the United States of America by other countries, just like stealing candy from a baby. Therefore, in order to solve this long-time, never-ending problem, I will be imposing a 100% tariff on any and all movies that are made outside of the United States. Now, if Trump follows through with his threat, it would mark the first time that he is essentially imposing a tariff on a service instead of a good. The president initially threatened a 100% tariff on foreign-produced movies back in May, arguing that other countries offer tax incentives that have drawn filmmakers abroad. In his post on Monday, he singled out California, saying that the state has been particularly hard hit. The state, meanwhile, has proposed and put in effect many tax incentives, as have many other states in America. And before this, that is pretty much the strategy to get the movie industry to film somewhere, to offer tax incentives. This is really the first time we've ever heard about a tariff on movies.
Right. They've offered incentives, not punishments here. But it has been interesting to watch the evolution of films and filming locations over the last few decades. I mean, it once was just Hollywood, right? And then, it sort of spread out domestically. Vancouver became really big in Canada. Now, there's a number of locations, whether they're in the UK, Morocco, Ireland, Hungary, Croatia, Romania, Australia, New Zealand, that all have become really big when it comes to making films. But the implementation of all of this is still very unclear, because the way that movies are shot, some of them are shot partially domestically, some internationally. Are you going to tariff a movie based on the percentage of the film that was shot abroad versus domestically? Also, there's like various limited series, like how will you define a film versus a TV series? Again, getting to the core question you asked, Jill, which is a good versus a service. How exactly is that going to work? How will that work for foreign films trying to seek release in the U.S.? Just a lot of questions across the industry on what this means. And apparently this all came about because Trump had a conversation with Jon Voight, the actor Jon Voight, who's close to President Trump. He apparently suggested this to Trump several months back. Trump tweeted it out. Now Trump is reiterating it several months later. So that is the film tariff that he's considering. Then there's the other tariff, Jill, you mentioned, which is the furniture tariff. Apparently key here, he's trying to help the furniture industry out of North Carolina, but he's talking here about what he calls a substantial tariff on furniture. He has previously said that he would put in place a 50% tariff on kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and other products scheduled to begin this Wednesday, along with a 30% tariff on upholstered furniture. So this is pretty significant. We all know, those of us especially that have, had to deal with renovations, how expensive things have already gotten in recent years, on top of the potential tariffs here. So this is another case where a number of the industries here in the U.S., including the National Kitchen and Bath Association, a trade group that has designers, builders, and retailers like Home Depot among them, they're all awaiting the details here on what this means and ultimately how much this could hike costs for Americans moving forward.
As somebody who just bought a new house and is looking to furnish said house,
buy all your furniture in the next 36 hours,
This could not come at a worse time. Okay, from CNN, Tropical Storm Imelda is strengthening and expected to become a hurricane by today as it moves off the southeast coast, kicking up dangerous surf, rip currents, coastal flooding, and beach erosion from Florida through the Carolinas. At the same time, Hurricane Umberto, which briefly exploded into a rare Cat 5 storm with 160-mile-per-hour winds on Saturday, is now a large Category 4 hurricane. Located a few hundred miles east of Imelda, Umberto's massive size will compound the hazards for U.S. beaches this week, driving deadly rip currents and big waves farther north along the east coast than Imelda alone. However, some forecasters say we should be thanking Umberto because it's apparently helping to keep Imelda from really pounding into the southeast United States.
Yeah, if you look at the trajectory of these two, they're going to crisscross and effectively one storm impacts the other here. And so one storm will effectively prevent the other storm from hitting the U.S. Now, one country getting a sort of double threat here is Bermuda. Umberto is going to pass to the west of the island, bringing bands of rain, gusty winds, and dangerous surf. And then Imelda could track even closer to Bermuda and could even actually make a direct landfall Wednesday into Thursday. So Bermuda watching this very closely. In the meantime, look for some potential coastal flooding along Florida's Space Coast, North Carolina's Outer Banks. The Bahamas are enduring a number of winds and heavy rain as well. Mudslides in Cuba. And again, watch out for that surf. These hurricanes, even when they don't hit the U.S., there's two of them out there, and they could create some very dangerous surf conditions out there if you're using any East Coast beaches.
From the New York Times, working 9 to 5 is a way to make a living, as Dolly Parton has told us. But in Silicon Valley, amid the competitive artificial intelligence craze, grinding 996 is the way to get ahead. So that number combo refers to a work schedule 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. It has its origins in China's hard-charging tech scene. Back in 2021, a Chinese court actually banned employees from compelling their workers to work 72-hour weeks, but that has not stopped California tech workers from fixating on the approach and apparently posting about it nonstop on X and LinkedIn. Evidence of this trend so far is largely anecdotal. Some companies have been actually noting their expectation for a 70-hour plus work week in job descriptions, and executives are said to be asking prospective hires if they are willing to work those type of schedules.
Quite a change from just a few years ago in 2020 when it was like, you could go remote. We're trying to take it easy a little bit. This go around in this job environment, it appears this sort of old school tech hard charging philosophy is back, Jill. In some cases, some people would say it never went away at some companies or in some divisions of some companies. Ramp, which is a financial operations startup, noted in a blog post this month that it has observed a higher share of corporate credit card transactions in San Francisco on Saturdays for the first half of this year versus previous years, which it took to mean that people are now working more on the weekends. We'll wait to hear more. I know we have a lot of folks in the Mo News audience who work in Silicon Valley, work in the tech world. So if you have interesting examples of this happening or discussions around this, please send them our way over on Instagram. Though, Jill, you began the story by talking about working 9 to 5 and mentioning Dolly, which gets us to a headline about Dolly Parton in the news.
Yeah, Dolly Parton will not be lighting up the Las Vegas Strip this December. She just revealed to fans that she's having some health challenges that are forcing her to postpone her residency in the city. She is 79 years old, the country music icon, releasing a statement that was posted to social media. She says she was told by doctors that she has to undergo a few procedures, and she didn't really elaborate any more than that. But she said, quote, "Given this, I am not going to be able to rehearse and put together the show that I want you to see and the show that you deserve to see."
There were some lighthearted moments in the statement, Jill. She did joke that she's not seeing a plastic surgeon. She did say again, though, that she cannot perform the show that she wants fans to see. She was set to perform 6 shows at Caesar's Palace. It would have been her first residency in Vegas in more than 30 years. And so they've been postponed until next September, so 9 months from now. We should note that earlier this year, she lost her husband of 60 years and did say recently that she was planning to take a break from writing new music to engage in the grieving process.
And finally, from NBC News, the tallest bridge in the world, standing at 2,050 feet in elevation, is now open to traffic and the public. It opened in China on Sunday. According to Chinese state media, it is also the world's longest bridge within a mountain range. It stretches 4,600 feet across. The Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge runs above a river and a gorge. It is actually more than twice as high as the Royal Gorge Bridge, which is suspended about 956 feet above the Arkansas River in Colorado, which is the highest in the United States. So double the height as the tallest bridge in America.
Yeah, it's triple the height of the Golden Gate, more than double the height of that Royal Gorge Bridge. If you've ever been there, it's about an hour south of Colorado Springs. Now, China is home to a number of the tallest bridges in the world. This one took 3 years to build. Some people making note of that in the U.S., it might have taken us 10 or 20 years to build a similar...
3 years to get the permits in the United States.
3 years to, right, to go through the various regulations, especially in certain states. But, Jill, if you have the stomach for it, there's apparently a high-speed glass elevator that will send you to a coffee spot 2,600 feet above the river. There's a glass walkway 2,600 feet up. That'll freak you out. You're out there in the open air on a glass walkway on the tallest bridge in the world. There's also, beyond that, bungee jumping off the bridge. So, Jill, next time you're in China, go take that glass elevator up to the top like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Or Charlie in the Glass Elevator. That was like after. I think that was like a sequel.
The video of this is very cool, Moshe. I don't think I have the stomach for it, though.
We're going to live vicariously through the video that we posted on Instagram of the other people doing it. Yes. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1918 on this day, a significant statement by President Woodrow Wilson, who gives a speech on this day before Congress saying it's time to let women vote. Now, the U.S. House had already approved the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, giving women the right to vote, but the Senate wasn't approving it. They had too many people opposed to it. And Woodrow Wilson actually wasn't a big suffragist, wasn't a big advocate, but he had been picketed by suffragists outside the White House in 1917. They were berating him, saying it is time to give women the right to vote. A number of those women were arrested, jailed, and then went on a hunger strike. He then learned details about how they were being force-fed in prison and said that enough is enough here. I got to get behind this cause. So on this day in history, he would give this speech before Congress saying, come on, time to let women have the right to vote. They still wouldn't have passed it for another year until the Senate finally had the votes to pass the 19th Amendment. All right, on this day in 1938, the notorious Munich Agreement was reached on this day in history. This is the agreement in which Britain's Prime Minister at the time, Neville Chamberlain, encouraged Britain and France to appease Adolf Hitler's demands in hopes of preventing World War II. And so that included signing away parts of the Czech Republic, Austria, all these measures that Hitler demanded, saying, if you give me all this stuff, there will be no war. Chamberlain said, let's give him this stuff. There will be no war. That didn't work out, hence why it's the notorious Munich Agreement, because then just a few months later, Hitler would start a war with his plan to take over the world. We'll end here with a bit of lighter news, some pop culture news on this day in history. In 1982, Marvin Gaye releases Sexual Healing, turning 43 years old today. Murder, She Wrote turns 41 years old today. The series that starred Angela Lansbury first premiered on CBS on this day in 1984. And we end here with Mariah, sort of one of the voices of the 90s, Jill. On this day in 1995, she makes history when she begins an 8-week run atop the Billboard charts with Fantasy, becoming the first female act to debut as a number one. We have now seen so many of those, including some artists that we know very well, like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and others. But at the time, Mariah made history 30 years ago today.
A Long Islander, Moshe.
You got Billy Joel and Mariah Carey, The Sound of Long Island.
I thought you were going to say and Joey Buttafuoco. I don't know why I thought you were going to go there. And I'm happy you didn't.
For those who lived through the 90s, you would know that name. If you didn't live through the 90s, you can Google Joey Buttafuoco.
Or don't.
Or don't.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you do not miss an episode, and review us kindly in the App Store.
And if you want to support us, consider joining Mo News Premium, mo.news/premium, mo.news/premium. By becoming a member, you get access to our weekend coverage. You get access to our weekly exclusive Ask Mo Anything podcast. You get early episodes on the premium podcast. You get access to our Slack channel. You get a whole bunch of exclusive analysis. You get workshops. We did one last night on all things hate speech versus free speech. So time is a ticking here. Time for you to join Mo News Premium, mo.news/premium. Check it out.
You can listen on Mo News Premium app.